how do I deal with judging things and people? When is it a sin to judge? Because we all have this thing in our head today, you can't judge anybody or anything, right? Everyone gets to do whatever they want to do, and you can't judge. And that's just not true. It's not true at all. It's not what the scriptures teach us today. We have to learn, though, the right way of judging. What are we called to do by God to judge things that go on around us? In churchy terms, this judging is called fraternal correction. How do we correct things that are wrong according to the mind of the Lord? Well, our readings teach us today how to do this, how we are to judge properly and how we are to correct others. In our first reading from the prophet Ezekiel, it is made very clear in both the first reading and the gospel, actually, that we all have an obligation to speak out when things or actions are contrary to the teachings of Jesus. We have an obligation to speak out, to say this action, this thing is not the way the Lord would want it to be. Ezekiel is warned by the Lord that if he does not speak out, that he himself will suffer the consequences of the other person's wrongdoing. That we have an obligation to point out when things are not the way they're supposed to be. It's very clear that that's what we're to do. The second point of this, Jesus makes clear in the gospel that it's our task to warn others, to point out the problem, not to force a change. Everyone has free will. They can choose to do as they wish. Our task, though, is to point out and say, this action is not correct. And then, if they change, wonderful. And if they don't change, it's between them and God. Our job is not to force anyone to change, but our task is to point out the things that are not according to the plan of God. And the final thing that we learn today about judging in the readings is that all of this is to be done out of love for the other. Not out of selfish motives. I don't like things that way. Not pushing my ideas on someone else. I've got it figured out, and if you just did what I said you should do, everything would be good. That our correcting of others must truly be done because I love that other person and I want only what is best for them. And that I believe that following the path of God is what is really best for them. Our correcting must always and only be done out of love. And when it is done out of love, St. Paul says in our second reading, love does no wrong. It is not wrong, it is not a sin when out of love I point out to someone something that should change in their lives. Love does no wrong. If we correct out of love, if we correct lovingly, then we do no harm. People may not like what we have to say. Again, that's entirely their choice. But there is no sin when we correct out of love. Now, one thing we need to note, that when we are called to judge, we are called to judge actions, words, situations, but nowhere at all in the sacred scriptures are we called to judge people's hearts. Nowhere are we called to ever judge the goodness the holiness or the lack of goodness or holiness of another person. We can never say, because this person does this thing, they're an evil person. I can't judge someone's heart. I can't judge if someone's good or holy in the eyes of God. I can judge an action, and I can say that action, those words, this situation is not the way God intends it to be. But I can never judge the goodness or the holiness of another person. And if I do ever find myself judging the goodness or the holiness of another person, then that's where sin comes in on my part. And I need to go to confession and deal with that. Because now I've judged someone in a sinful way. I've not judged the way God calls me to judge, but I've made myself the arbiter of goodness, of holiness. And that's a sin that then I need to confess. So we are called to judge actions, words, and situations. But we're never called to judge the hearts of another. And so let us, my dear friends, truly love one another. Truly love one another. And help each other on our journey to the Lord's kingdom by helping us to see our actions, our words that may not be in line with those of the Lord. To help them, to help all of us hear those words of the Lord better and respond with more generous hearts. When we truly love one another and we truly help each other with true fraternal correction, then we all become more and more that faithful disciple of Jesus. We more and more model that love of the Lord, and we help each other come closer to the kingdom of God.